Alright, it's finally about time for me to talk about some news and some interesting articles I've read over the last few days. And one article I have right here that I haven't really talked about, and not many people talk about too much, and it's about how blacks and Hispanics don't get lent home mortgages nearly the rates that white people do. This is from truthday.org, and it talks about how 50 years after the federal Fair Housing Act banned racial discrimination in lending, African Americans and Latinos continue to be routinely denied conventional mortgage loans at rates far higher than their white counterparts. This modern day redlining persisted in 61 metro areas, even when controlling for applicants' income, loan amount, and neighborhood, according to a mountain of Home Mortgage Disclosure Act records. The year-long analysis, based on 31 million records, relied on techniques used by leading academics, the Federal Reserve, and Department of Justice to identify lending disparities. It found a pattern of troubling denials for people of color across the country, including in major metropolitan areas such as Atlanta, Detroit, Philadelphia, St. Louis, and San Antonio. African Americans face the most resistance in southern cities: Mobile, Alabama; Greenville, North Carolina, right in my backyard; and Gainesville, Florida; and Latinos in Iowa City, Iowa. No matter their location, loan applicants told similar stories describing an uphill battle with loan officers who they said seemed to be fishing for a reason to say no. So since our nation is based on white supremacy and a two-tiered justice system, or more accurately, I should say, a two-tiered social system, where pretty much every other class or every other race is up here at this level, and then black people are at least at a secondary level. Or scratch that, maybe I should say, whites are near the top, blacks and Hispanics are at a lower tier, because these laws have been on the books about anti-discrimination. You can't discriminate in the workplace. You can't discriminate when it comes to getting college loans. You can't discriminate when it comes to serving customers, so on and so forth. And like what this article talks about, there's anti-discrimination laws in place, so you can't discriminate when it comes to giving out loans for housing. And especially important because most people really build up their wealth, especially when you go to generational wealth, and that's built through home ownership. It's not just that black people and Hispanic people are getting kneecapped by not being able to take out home loans and purchase homes, but they're not able to move into different neighborhoods or certain neighborhoods. All these loan officers and these mortgage companies and banks, they just simply make sure that a bunch of black people have to stay in certain neighborhoods. They can't get out of these poor neighborhoods or these black neighborhoods or just these minority neighborhoods. So it really just kneecaps people's ability to be able to grow their income, especially grow their wealth, but also it's an active way to segregate people, is to say, no, I'm not gonna let you buy this house over here. You just gotta make sure you buy that house over in this minority neighborhood. You can't go in the white neighborhoods at all, just because I'm gonna just fucking say nope. I'm gonna always try to figure out or find a reason to say no. I don't want to give you a loan. And this really isn't a new problem. This has been going on probably since this country was even a country to begin with. But just for it to be in the books for this many decades, and for racial discrimination with home lending or mortgage lending is still an issue, really shows you that a lot of enforcement just really hasn't been going on. And we still need a lot of work to do to make sure that we have equity within our society, and we really do not have that at all. We have some little false false sentiment or maybe some false advertising about how we have an equal and a just social system and a just society, but we're far from it. And this is just one reason or one example of how our society crushes black and brown people. One thing that would alleviate some of this would be to actually charge people with discrimination and just violating people's civil rights to be able to um, invest and purchase a home or to make renovations to your home, because this article talks about it later down in the article that people also just can't fix up an older home because they're not able to take out loans for it, even if they do own the house. So just black and Hispanic home ownership, it's been a thing of the past, and it was still not very strong back in the past either. So then when I was just checking out this article, I also just stumbled on this article from USA Today. It talks about how Bancorp South has agreed to pay a $10.6 million settlement of allegations that bank used discriminatory mortgage lending practices that harmed African Americans and other minorities. But this was back in 2016. The article I just did was from a few days ago. Okay, and then I'll go on with this article about this bank. And a federal court complaint filed by the Department of Justice and Consumer Financial Protection Bureau alleged bank officials told loan officers to turn down minority mortgage applicants more quickly than whites, avoiding giving borderline applicants credit assistance that other mortgage seekers might receive. Bancorp South disagreed with the allegations and did not admit liability, but agreed to filing of the proposed consent order. Then the article goes down a little bit more about how, a little bit more specifically about how they really turned down African American applicants more quickly than they did white people. And it goes on a little bit about how they talk to black people in general. And I'll skip that a little bit, but one important part about this new USA Today article, it says federal officials in the complaint allege Bancorp South violated Federal Housing and Equal Credit Opportunity Acts by illegally redlining in Memphis, the market from which it receives the most applicants, by structuring business to avoid and discourage mortgage applicants from consumers in minority areas from at least 2011 to 2013. Properly having one of the bank's lending units deny mortgage and other loan applicants from African Americans at higher rates than whites. Discriminating against African American borrowers by charging them higher annual percentage rates than whites with similar loan qualifications. And that last one's a big one because that's just straight up a racist policy of making sure black people have to pay more money than whites just because they're black. And then here's a quote right here that says, when banks discriminate on the basis of race, they violate our civil rights laws and threaten the foundation of a fair economy and a fair society, because it doesn't just affect the economy when black households have to pay more on their loans than white households. But since our government is weak as hell, instead of having some of those loan officers and those bank officials to get arrested for violating especially black people's civil rights, they just have the bank pay a small fine. And $10.6 million for a huge bank is definitely a small fine. They probably didn't give a shit really about paying that fine off, because that's just a drop in the bucket for all the profits that they make. So it might sound big for us, but for Bancorp South, at least back then, they probably didn't give a shit. And then TruthDig also had an article I wanted to talk about. It's about one of the GOP candidates here in North Carolina, Republican Mark Harris. He's credibly accused of paying a consultant to may have stolen or altered absentee ballots cast for his opponent. And the officials have even refused to certify the vote for that race. So the article goes more in general about how our election system really isn't fair, especially fair to African Americans, because historically, white people and conservatives have really fought to make sure that they could do anything and everything in their power to make sure that black people don't vote, because they wanted to really make sure that black people really were a second-class citizen here in the United States. And here is just another example of that continuing. That is that they know they can't win an election just straight up, so they got to make sure they push to make sure they get all these voter ID laws in place, so they could really make sure black people have less of a chance to vote, because the majority of the time it's black people that are not going to have those voter or just have an ID in general. And then they've also done other things like cut early voting down, shut down a lot of polling places, and a few other tactics. And everything they did was they did a whole bunch of research to make sure that they specifically target African Americans. And just all these issues about taking black people's civil rights away is all because our government is just a shitty government. They do not work to make sure that everybody gets their civil rights met, and make sure that anybody that tries to violate them actually get thrown in jail. Nobody has been thrown in jail for this, for any of these yet. I guess it's still in proceedings would still be going on, and they're still going through the investigation, I suppose. But at the end of it, nobody's going to get thrown in jail. Nobody's going to get prosecuted for committing these important crimes and doing all these important violations to people's civil rights. They all do it in the name of, oh, we gotta bullshit and make something up about voter fraud, and they just do that to distract their base and then start committing election fraud, or just stripping people's voting abilities away, and that's unconstitutional and that's illegal. So they kind of just show that many people that claim to say or claim to be there strictly for the Constitution or they're for the rule of law, no, they're really not. They just want to be heavy-handed against black people and Hispanic people, and that's about it. Because when it comes to making sure black people and Hispanic people need equal protections, they're not really for that. So, and then also want to talk about Elizabeth Warren announcing that she's running for president. Technically, she didn't announce that she's running for president. She just announced that she's going to explore to see the options about she's running. But in reality, she's just running without officially announcing. So, because I know that at least from 2016 election, when I really started following it, that whenever presidential candidates, officially announced, then the rules change for how they raise money. So I think she really wants to make sure that she could get all that funny money, or that maybe illicit or that dark money, keep a lot of that flowing in. And then, since it's 2019 now, I think she might wait until December, like January of 2020 to, officially announce that she's running. But she did have a video that she played about her plans. And I don't think I'm going to place it in this video, because I've watched a few other progressive journalists that they put her video in it. And I think I'm just going to place a link of her video under mine, so you guys could go watch it. But it's been a couple days, I think, so I don't really remember everything she talked about. But one thing, and the video it wasn't too long, but I did notice she didn't really talk about poor people. And that's important because the poor are the most vulnerable people in our society. Well, I guess you could say actually the homeless. Homeless people and poor people are the most vulnerable people in our society. And since she's not really talking about how she could help poor people and maybe even working class people, because she just talks about the middle class. At least she did have a chart on there that showed that black people make a hell of a lot less than white people do on average. I think it's about half or maybe a little bit less than half. So that's good, but a lot of what she's talking about was her family history. I don't give a shit about that. Don't think most people give a shit about that. Because that has nothing to do with what policy she's going to push. Because at the end of the day, president and Congress and any legislator, the heart of the job is what policies or what laws specifically are you going to write to help the people out. And are you going to write laws to help the people, or are you going to write laws to help the big corporations and your donors? And she didn't go with talk anything specific about what policies that people need to make sure that their lives are improved, especially with the poor, the middle class people, because we don't really need to help out the wealthy because they're already taken care of. No problem. They actually need to be taxed more, so we, the working and the poor people, actually get taken care of a lot better than we are right now. So she did talk some rhetoric about how big corporations have really just gutted the middle class. And that's not too bad, but what specifically does she want to do against the corporations to make sure that, in her terms, the middle class gets a fair shake? But the big thing I want to say is that she's a capitalist. She is definitely not gonna even go as far as Bernie Sanders did in 2016 and say that Wall Street fucked over the American people, so I'm actually going to break up all those big banks to make sure that the big banks can't collapse the U.S. economy again, or the global economy for that matter, and they can't keep screwing the public and actually just extracting wealth from the people and putting it in their pockets. But since she just started her campaign, we don't know for sure. But I don't think she's even going to go that far. And then I don't think Bernie Sanders is going to go far enough to the left and say, yeah, we actually need to break down capitalism, because capitalism only works for the people that own the capital, the owners of the big businesses, and all the CEOs and all the the shareholders and the people on the boards. So I don't even think even Bernie goes far enough to the left and say, we need socialism for the people and not just for these big corporations. So Elizabeth Warren, I'm definitely not going to vote for her at all. Will she be a little bit better than the centrist candidates like Kirsten Gillibrand and Cory Booker and especially Kamala Harris? Yeah, she'll be a little bit better, but we're in too dire straits to, at least for me, to just say, a little bit better than the corporatists is good enough for me. Because I don't even want to vote for Bernie right now. The only way I consider voting for him is if he ran in the Democratic primaries against Elizabeth Warren, and then after they cheat Bernie again, he says, I'm going to run independent because they cheated me twice because they're corrupt as fuck. So you guys need to come with me and let's break this party because they haven't represented the poor and the working class people for several decades. So it's time to build something new, and let's go independent or let's go Green Party. It's time to break them in half and actually start striking and start marching and working for the people. I don't think he's going to do that, so I don't think I could vote for him either. but we'll see.